Bruchim Aboim B'Shem Hashem. Shem Eigen Shir Torah. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's shir from Rabbi Yakov on the topic of Simchos, music, etc. during the days of Sefirah. We would like to have the great schools to sponsoring a shir call Eigen Shir Torah at 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. Rabbi Smith.
Last year we had a shayla where a boy was bar mitzvah during the Sefirah, and they made up they weren't going to have music because of the Sefirah. And one night he came home from yeshiva, he was crying, the bar mitzvah, the boy, his friend had a bar mitzvah the other night, and they had dancing. Why can't he have lamanigar? Why can't he also have dancing? So I wanted to look into the sugya of bar mitzvahs, dancing. Could you have music? Or today we have the shayla of a chazzanus, where people have a chazzanus of a relative, but they're holding Sefirah. They different minhagim, some keep, some don't keep. At this time of the year, before Rosh Chodesh or after Lag Boima, can you attend the chazzanus when you're during Sefirah? Making a שהחיינו in the Sefirah period, moving into a home. If you notice, the common denominator is the question of Simchos, whether it's a chazzanus, bar mitzvah, siyum, Sefirah, שהחיינו. What is halachos regarding the Sefirah period? And what makes it more challenging, you should know, is this sugya of Simchos during the Sefirah is not mentioned in the Gemara, Rif, Rosh, or Rambam. In other words, Ben HaMetzorim, we find the end of Tainus, it's a Gemara in Sanhedrin. The mitzvah of Sefirah we find in Gemara, but the minhag of not having simcha, of avoiding chazzanus during these days is not mentioned in Gemara, Rif, Rosh, or Rambam. And the question we have to try to clarify is basically what is the extent or what is the level of the Issa that we seem to be aware of during the Sefirah period. Is it like the 3 weeks? Is it like the 9 days? Is it has its own halachos? And hopefully once we know the makar or the extent of it, then we'll know the who's awesome and what's awesome and when is it awesome. We'll understand the different minhagim regarding this very important shayla. I say it's important because it's not like קידוש birchas achama once in 28 years. This is more than a month of every year of all of our lives. We have the question of Simchos during the Sefirah period. So to my knowledge, the earliest source is a Tshuvas HaGo'ainim, Sharei Tshuva, and Siman Reishai and Ches, where the question was asked, what's the reason why we don't get married during the Sefirah period? Now, this is a very powerful question, because we know the mitzvah of Pruavu is a mitzvah rabbah. Chabad said in the beginning of an Evanes, you're allowed to sell a Sefer Torah to enable someone to get married. And we never ever push off getting married. And here it's a month plus that you're not allowed to get married. Where does it come from? So the response is, it's not an Issa, I guess like Chalamoid is an Issa Malacha, but it's a minhag aveilus. And he quotes the well-known Gemara in Yevamis, Daf Samach Beis, Amid Beis, that Rabbi Kiva lost 24,000 Talmidim in this period between Pesach and Atzeres. And then what's important, I quote, after that terrible churban, nahagu harishonim b'yamim elu shleilikanes behem, not to get married. Now, we'll soon see, he says, you're allowed to get engaged, but the ikka is marriage, and this is an important point, she'ein simcha ela b'chuppah. The ikka simcha is getting married. That's the Gemara in Sukkah Chaf Hei. In other words, the getting engaged is a wonderful simcha, but that's not us. You're allowed to get engaged. But getting married, nisuin, is the real issa. Now you think about it, the lashon ma'osis shah implies that the minhag began in the times of Tanoim. I don't know of another minhag that goes back to the Tanoim's times. Ma'osis shah. And I understand it, you know. Remember last year we had one day, 2 Gedolei Yisrael were lifting the same day, David Salvechik and Yitzchak Shaina, and people felt like a churban. 2 Gedolim in one day. Think about this: 24,000 Tanoim, Kadoshim, not little kinderlach, Talmidei B'Kibbutz Tanoim, died in a period of 33 days. That's close to 1,000 per day. The churban, and the Gemara says, "Oilam shamein." Rashi teaches. So basically, it almost automatically called out a minhag to stop marriages in this aveilus period. The Aruch HaShulchan writes, Saloshin in our Simon, Tov Tzad Gimel Seed Beis, which really the Torah writes, Nahagu b'kol Yisrael, b'chol ha'makaymes. But the Aruch HaShulchan adds, Mimois ha'go'oinim. So I'd imagine initially the minhag began where Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim lived. But it was such an important minhag, it traveled the world. So definitely Mimois ha'go'oinim and on was the minhag not to get married during these days. Now this is a chiddush even in halacha. Because even in Avel, after Shiva, if he's not yet Mekayim Pirav, he's allowed to get married during the Shloshim even. And here in aveilus of 2,000 years ago, we can't get married. And even if someone was not yet married. And obviously, there's a lot to this minhag. But also, if you notice, the minhag seems to be only regarding marriage. No mention of haircutting. This, again, to my knowledge, is the minhag began in the times of the Rishonim. The Avudraham explains that the only issa was chuppah or getting married. The minhag of not taking haircuts, as the Torah explains, is al aveilus. But it's a later minhag with a later severity. The original takana miyamois of Tanoim was marriage. Once they had an aveilus mode, they asked getting haircuts for the same reason. But what's even makes it even more painful that the trouble didn't stop with the times of Talmidei Rabbi Akiva. The Taz in our Simmons he'd cut in Beis says, pardon me, the guy you should date, but the year 1096 there was the Crusades, where a big part of Germany was destroyed, and that was bein Pesach la'atzeres. More blood-soaked in these days. There was a second wave of this terrible churban 50 years later, Tavsaf Kuf Nun Vav. More churban again in the days of Sefirah. And it's noteworthy that the minhag of saying of Rachaman, that whole nusach, was composed during the Crusades, during the terrible churban. In fact, there are different minhagim, but some say it even Rosh Chodesh, when you bench Rosh Chodesh Sivan, some say even when you bench Rosh Chodesh Iyar, some say you say it is coming, when it comes Shabbos, Erev, Shavuos, even though it's Erev Yom Tov, we say Avarachman, the different minhagim, but the Avarachman was composed because of the tsaris of those years of the Crusades. But Nebuch, the tsaris didn't end. 500 years later, approximately, was the infamous Gezeres Tach V'Tat, where about 700 Kehilos Kedoshim were annihilated by the Cossacks and the Poles, Yamach Shemam, which very much indicates that the days themselves, being Pesach Latzeres, have something very wrong with them, if you could say that. And I say that very carefully, because there's an incredible tshuva of the Shvus Yakov in Chelik Bey, Simon Lamed Hey. He lived after the Taz, and the question was asked by someone that didn't have children, and he wanted to get married bein ha-mitzarim because he wasn't yet mekayim the mitzvah. And his reasoning was, even in aveilus alav ve'ima, after Shiv, you're allowed to get married. So how could bein ha-mitzarim be worse? So then he discusses not only bein ha-mitzarim, he groups together Sefirah and bein ha-mitzarim, and he discusses both them together. And listen to what he says. He says, Lamaisa, there were those that are mekel. And there was a Rav that was mekel. If someone was not yet mekayim the mitzvah puravu, he's allowed to get married during bein ha-mitzarim and Sefirah. But I can't accept that. Because loisamna milsa, these days are not conducive to getting married. The famous Gemara says that regarding tinik ve'ish, bayis tinik ve'ish sheyesh siman, there is something about the days. In fact, many Yidden are very moist enough not to get married during the end of the month, or daf get married, tachas kippas hashemayim. We look for good simanim. So reasons the Shvus Yakov to get married in days that are soaked with Yiddish blood throughout our history. Don't forget, it's not just Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim, it was the Crusades, and it was Kzeres Tach V'Tat. And he says a scary story. There was a Chacham Echad that was mated to get married during Sefirah, and the Zivik didn't work out. And he says, because Chamira Sakantam Isura. So that adds an added sense of urgency to this minhag. It's not just aveilus, it's loisam milsa, and it has the element of chamira sakanta meisur. Now, of course, I want to mention, if there are minhagim that you do make a chazana until Chodesh Iyar, last week and even today there are chazanas. If that's within halacha, it's fine. I know someone told me, heard this from Rav Vosner personally, Rabbi Shmuel Vosner, Zechaynu Livracha. He asked about getting married in the end of Chodesh Nissan. So Rav Vosner says you could get married. And by the way, I also got married the end of Nissan, and I think I did pretty well. Shaynemo did pretty well. But that's what he said. So Lamaisa, these days have two independent issues. Aveilus, and also Laisam Milsa is just not very gebenched the days. Lamaisa, if you look in the Chak Yakov and Sifkat and Gimel, there are other reasons. Gehenim starts and Sa'orim, and there are other reasons why it makes them Imei Hadin. And as our Chashulchan puts it succinctly, Eli Yoyamid Ben Pesach Latzeres, Muchzik Eitzakol Yisrael, Meyos Rabbis, Shanim, Liyemei Din, V'yemei Avil. So it's a compounded reason why the minhag has taken such a strong chaymer. It's Yemei Din and Yemei Avil. Now, to return to our original question, so now that we know a little bit more about Sefirah, so what is the intensity of it? Is it like the 3 weeks? Is it like the 9 days? So the emissaries will say, well, if it has both features of Avel and Yemei Din, it should be like the 9 days. But there's one factor to consider. Because the Churban Abayis, although a long time ago, we are still in Churban Abayis. We don't have a Beis HaMikdash. But the Churban of Torah, the Olam Shamim in Talmidei Rabbi Akiva, Baruch Hashem, today we have an Olam HaTorah. And that's why the Maimon Mordechai, one of the Gedolei Svarad, in Sivkot and Beis, was asked, can I make a Shechianu in the days of Sefirah? So he first says, well, we find in halacha, in Tov Kuf and Aleph Yud Zayin, you're not supposed to make a Shechianu during the 3 weeks. But we don't find regarding the Sefirah. And he says, I think people don't make a Shechianu because they make a mistake and they confuse Sefirah and the 3 weeks. He says, oh, but Lamaisa, there's a good reason not to make Shechianu. Because it's aveilus. And also, he quotes the Binyamin Ze'ev and Kuf Samach Gimel. How could you make a Shechianu in during the days of Metzorim? How can you say Bizman has Shechianu, Lazman has days of Churban? No. And then he says, maybe, listen to this, maybe it's a Kal V'choima that you can't make a Shechianu in Sefirah. Because especially for Svardim, the real Niyog Aveilus is a Shvur Shechalbai. But he says, but the Sefirah we all keep. So he says, maybe Taka, it'd be Asa to make a Shechianu during the Yemei Sefirah. But then he says, like he said earlier, but I didn't find it in Shulchan Aruch. Had it been us, it should say in Shulchan Aruch. And I think the hezbah is because Churban Beis HaMikdash is more chomer, and Laida we are still experiencing Churban Abayis, but the Churban Talmidei Rabbi Akiva, Lamaisa we have a Torah rebuilt. And then he concludes, V'chein ani noyeg, I do not refrain from making Shechianu in these days. So we have a custom-made shtickle to our Shaila. That Lamaisa, it has both elements. It's Taka Aveilus, it's Taka Leisimna Milsa. But it's not as severe as the 9 days. There was a second gadol in a different part of the world, in the Lushay Mordechai in Hungary, in Chelik Dalet, Simon Kuf Nun Gimel. He also was asked about Shechianu, and he writes, in Galila Elyon and Oibalan, the minhag is not to make a Shechianu. But where I come from in Hungary, the minhag is some do and some don't. And he has come out the same approach like the Maimon Mordechai. He says that really it's as mana peranius, how can you man hazeh? But at the end of the day, Torah has been rebuilt. So he writes, Lamaisa, his minhag is to make a Shechianu in these days. So we definitely see that there are those that had a minhag not to make a Shechianu. But the minhag seems to be, at least what these Gedolei Yisrael say, that since it's not as intense of an aveilus, and the Churban HaTorah has been rebuilt, there's no Issa Shechianu. Now this, it seems to me, all agree that many halachos of the 3 weeks don't apply to the Sefirah. There's no Issa swimming, as we'll see, no Issa of showering, of buying new clothing, as we'll see. What to me was interesting, the Minchas Alaza in Chelik Dalet, Mem Dalet, was asked, he heard that someone said he has a minhag not to travel in these days of Sefirah. So Minchas Alaza reacted very sharply. He says, I don't believe someone said that. Yishtaka davel ayama. It's connected to Torah. But listen to his cheshbon. Because the Eden had to go oile regel on Pesach and Shavuos. So that means after Pesach they had to travel home. They have to travel back for Shavuos. So you see they travel in these days. He says, wait a minute. But the Akiva's Talmidim died after the Torah was given. Yeah, but he says, but had it been days that you shouldn't travel, they wouldn't have done that either. So he's very insistent that Lamaisa, it's not, you can't say it's dangerous days. In fact, he even says that there are aveilus in these months of Nisan, Iyar, and Sivan. They're the Toivas Yisrael, the Mesugalim. And the emphasis I would add, in Shulchan Aruch it says that if someone has a court case, not to do it during Chodesh of, beginning of Av, certainly. It says in Shulchan Aruch, you're not supposed to hit your Talmidim during the 3 weeks. We don't find that regarding Sefirah. So obviously, we're comfortable to say that yes, the Sefirah period has both concerns of aveilus, of Laisim the Milsa, but it's definitely not as severe as the 3 weeks, or even, and certainly not the 9 days. And now we could hopefully apply this Lamaisa. Let's try to organize it. First of all, there's no doubt about it, the minhag Yisrael is showering and cutting nails is mutter during the Sefirah. I did see the Leket Yosha, that was the minhagis of the Trumas Hadeshin, it's in page 97, Oizvav, that he didn't want to be makel to cut your nails during the Oima, during the Sefirah period. But that's not the minhag, definitely it's not the minhag. But the emphasis, when you're looking at Leket Yosha, he was very machmir regarding Sefirah. He didn't buy clothing, he didn't wear new clothing, but that's not the minhag. I saw the Divrei Malkiel and Chele Gimel, Simon Yud Gimel was asked about swimming during the Sefirah period, and he says the Issa is by the 9 days, not by the Sefirah period. But I found it interesting, the Archas Rabbeinu, the Steipel and Beis Sadekei was asked about swimming. I said, there's no Issa. So someone asked him, yeah, but it just happened last year during the Sefirah period. A few girls drowned when they went swimming during the Sefirah. So he says, that's not why they drowned. He said they went swimming without a lifeguard, and you go in a dangerous place, so people drown. So we learned 2 halachos from this. First of all, you can't make new isurim, and number 2, you can't do dangerous things. He attributed their drowning because there wasn't enough lifeguards. So the Torah said the chacham. That's what I learned, and that's what you see. You can't make a new issa. It was insufficient shmira. Shechianu, that's already a little of an issue. Again, we saw both in my Mordechai and in Mordechai there was a minhag not to make shechianu. And Taka, I saw more than that. If someone wants to change his minhag, he has to have a teres to dar, because it is a minhag Yisrael. And therefore, if someone has that minhag, you must continue it. But if someone says, he asked me, I don't have a minhag, what's the halacha? The halacha seems to be that there's no issa shechianu in the Sefirah period. The Mishnah Berurah quotes the Maimar Mordechai. He writes a par of a lashon, ein roi l'harbis b'simcha, that's one. In this damalei eze inyan shetzarech levarach shechianu yivorech. So I saw they asked Reb Chaim Kanievsky and the Mr. Karelitz, does that mean lechatchila you shouldn't do it only in this damin? So Reb Chaim said, no, you're allowed to make a shechianu. Reb Mr. Karelitz said, Mishnah Berurah says, don't make an inyan to make a shechianu during the Sefirah. Don't make an inyan. But if you have a shechianu, you're allowed to make it. Rabbi Yashiv and Yisa Ish, Aleph Tzadik Tes, Rabbi Yankov and Emes Yakov, and many others say that the Ika Halacha, there's no Issa Shechianu during the Sefirah period. So again, those that have a minhag Yisrael Torah, but Abba Lishol, he has no minhag, you're allowed to make a shechianu. Now, certainly, if a person, even if he doesn't make a shechianu, but if he has a bris or pidyon haben, and his minhag is to make a shechianu by a bris or pidyon haben, that avadi allowed to make. Because even by Yemei HaMetzarim, Tov Kuf Nun Aleph Yud Zayin, the Shulchan Aruch says you're allowed to make it by a bris or pidyon haben, because if you don't do it now, you can't do it later. And for those that make, I would add, those that make a shechianu on the birth of a girl, and again, in Vayachshav Eimasai. So those all agree they would be okay. Now, the truth is, those that don't make a shechianu, if they have a new fruit or they have a new clothing they must wear, there's a simple eitzah, and that is to wait till Shabbos and eat the new fruit or wear the beged l'kavod Shabbos. Because that the Mishnah Berurah and Tavkuf and Alf Sivkot and Tzadik Ches writes, even during the Yemei HaMetzarim, we don't make a shechianu, you're allowed to make a shechianu on Shabbos. So that would be an eitzah that you're allowed to make a l'chol hadayis. Now, as I told you earlier, buying clothing during Sefirah is mutter. Me'am tzarim is us. That says the first in Shulchan Aruch. The reason, of course, is it's a more intense aveilus, number 1. And number 2, as the Paiskim say, we should not be masiach das from aveilus. But that level does not exist regarding Sefirah. The Leket Yoish, I told you, is machmir, but Lamaisa, the minhag is to buy new clothing and even make a shechianu. Now, people have asked about moving into a new home on the Sefirah period. Now, the emphasis we could hear, if it's loisim, the milsa, and taka, we don't move in during the Bein HaMetzarim, maybe taka during Sefirah not. And indeed, in fact, I even saw a remez, because in Parashat Kiseitze, about going to war, there are two exemptions. If you got married or if you built a new home. So some equate the two. If you can't get married during Sefirah, you can't move into a new home. The Avnei Tzedek, in the Yeridea, Mem Dal, and Ravos, they come out the same attitude in Yud Kuf Lamed Hey. They say if you have to move, either move during on Rosh Chodesh or Lag B'Omer, or after Rosh Chodesh Sivan. But avoid moving into a new home during the general Sefirah period. However, I saw the Satmar Rav, this quote in Sefer Habayis, Amid Reish Peches. He himself moved during the Sefirah into a new home, and he said there's no Issa. Interesting, him and the Avnei Tzedek were related, but he said there's no problem. And basically, Rabbi Yashiv was also makel, and Lamaisa, again, Habal Lishol, if someone has a minhag not to move, so they'll move Avada. But if someone doesn't have a minhag and it's hard to move any other time, Avada, there would be a heta during the Sefirah, much more than during the Bein HaMetzarim period. I would just add that moving into a house has one kula more than what we said earlier regarding שהחיינו. And that is that when you move into a new home, if a person's married with children, you don't make a שהחיינו. The bracha made is a toiv ha-meitiv. A toiv ha-meitiv, even you could say during a Bein HaMetzarim. A toiv ha-meitiv is not שהחיינו l'azman hazeh. So there's nothing wrong with it even during the Bein HaMetzarim. So certainly there's nothing wrong with it during the Sefirah. So basically, that's makes it easier to move in. You could even make it a toiv ha-meitiv because there's no issa even during Bein HaMetzarim. Rav Wozna is quoted as saying to make a closing on a house is fine. That's only chayvis. There's no simcha to it, even though there is a simcha buying it, but that's not the simcha that he was concerned about by moving in. Now, painting or wallpapering, Rav Moshe has got a makel in Gimel Pei Beis, even 3 weeks until the Shua Shechal Bay, but definitely we don't find the surim of home repairs during the Yemei HaSefirah. Extending a home, which it says in Shulchan Aruch and Tafkuf and Aleph Beis, which is a big simcha, which is not done during the 3 weeks. No, that we can understand. Maybe it's inappropriate simcha. But we can't ask certainly any type of regular home repairs. Rabbi Yashiv is quoted as saying that if a person moves into a house, he can make a Chanukas Habayis, because once it's mutter to make a Chanukas Habayis. I did see Rabbi Yankov and Emes Yakov says, even though it's mutter, but it's tmua be'eni habriyos, to make a big Chanukas Habayis during the Sefirah. And that's the truth that we can understand it. Because people have a sensitivity to Sefirah days, and maybe that's inappropriate. Okay, a big question, which is really very negay, especially in our times, is the issue of music during Sefirah. Now today music has taken a new dimension. It's called acapella. It's an extending music to vocals or ke'en vocals. B'kitza, what's interesting is that there's no mention of music in Paiskim or Shulchan Aruch. Does that mean it's mutter? Not at all. It just means that they didn't have music like we have it today. You have to realize, they didn't have CDs. So when you clean for Pesach, today you put on a CD and you have music. But in the olden days, it was, you don't hire a band to play when you clean for Pesach. So basically, people couldn't afford music. And you got married, so you hired a musician. But they didn't have the music we have today. Plus, we have to be honest, in the olden days, they probably followed the pashtus of the Gemara in Gittin Daf Zayin and the Shulchan Aruch Tov Kuf Samach, that you now listen to music a whole year. Zeichel L'chorban. Rabbi Moshe has his famous tshuva that he's concerned the whole year about listening to music. So Sefirah was no different than the rest of the year. So that's why it was not an issue in the olden days. But today, there's a big industry called music. You know, we learned yesterday, B'chai Bohem. Some people live with the music, and they can't live without it. They have Sefirah alternatives. So what's the halacha? So there's a very yesodistic Magen Avram in our Tov Tzadik Aleph, where the Mechaber says you're not allowed to get married during the Sefirah period. But Magen Avram says to get engaged, you're allowed to, because engaged, like we said, the Ikka is the chuppah, the Nesuin. Zok the Magen Avram, you're allowed to get engaged, but you're not allowed to make rikudnu u'mechaylos. You can't have dancing. Obviously, dancing is a simcha great enough to be equal to getting married. Now, Zokti Aruch HaShulchan in Siv Beis, but our Paiskim, Rav Moshe, Rav Minchas Yitzchak, Kinyan Torah, and other Paiskim all say that means it's lav daf getting married. A full simcha, like dancing, is awesome. Zokti Aruch HaShulchan, and Rav Moshe is the same kamat, same lashon. So today we have music. Kal v'choyma, music is awesome. In other words, they didn't have music like we have today, so it wasn't mentioned. But today, logic dictates if dancing is awesome, kal v'choyma, music is awesome. Now, Lamaisa, Rav Moshe in that tshuva, and Rabbi Yashiv in the Sefer Yisa Ish add another svar, that the truth is that really a whole year we should not be listening to music. But for some reason we're makel, maybe we need it, but at least come Sefirah, we should follow Ikad Din. So whatever the case is, the Issa of music has become a regular, normal Issa, just like dancing is also during the Sefirah period. Now, some people say, yeah, maybe the only Issa is live music, but a CD or the like, which is recorded, is not live, maybe there's no Issa. And that's totally illogical. You have to realize, if the Issa of music is like on Shabbos, Shem Yisak and Klishir, so you could say that if you have a CD, doesn't break, you don't fix it. But the Issa is not the musical instruments. The Issa is the simcha that music brings. No, anybody who has an ear for music knows that a CD is a much better quality music than you have live playing by a chazzanus, because it's done with perfection, and it's definitely a better work of art than live music. But there's no doubt about it, the sound is the same, and that's why all the Paiskim equate the Issa of music even to recorded CDs and the like. Now, that l'chayr is pashit, and that is no suffix. The only question has become in recent years when they introduced acapella, vocals, which basically is singing. Now, the truth is, it started on a bad foot. The word acapella has an unholy source. It comes from whatever, I don't want to say where it came from, but it's not a holy word. And it became something of Sefirah that we have. Now, the emes is, technically you could say, if it's only a CD or a tape of singing, and we'll soon see singing is mutter, so how could a tape of singing be also? And Rabbi Moshe in Chelik Aleph Kuf Samach Vav, he's talking about before acapellas, but if you have sing over radio, there's no Issa, because the Issa is music. However, I must tell you that Lamaisa, many Paiskim have a different way of looking at it. Rav Vosner writes this in two tshuvas in Beis and Zayin and Ches Kuf Chav Zayin, Chotshani Chel Dalchin Ayin Test and Minchas Yitzchak and Libra all say this, that the Issa is music that's from a machine, a keli. The only heta is shira bepeh. Once it's more than shira bepeh, then it's asa. In other words, the heta is exclusively singing with one's mouth, the human voice. So Rav Vosner writes, once you put it onto a tape, even if the tape is only singing, now it's like shira b'kli. It's lav dafka shira with kli instrument, it's shira b'kli. And that's why they feel that a recording of singing is like a recording of music. The only heta is a kumzitz with his live singing. Now this is debatable, I understand, but these Paiskim felt that the Issa is only live singing. But, and here's the but, in recent years it has, I don't know if the word steigen is the right word, it has progressed in its quality. It's no longer singing. It's singing that's digitally or musically enhanced. I was told, and I was pretty surprised, but someone who knows told me, that they could take the most unpleasant sound and make it into the most gorgeous sound with mastering with electricity. So now, it's not just they recorded singing. It's a musically enhanced singing. So that's not shira b'peh. And I'll give you a mashal, l'sabra sa'oizim. When we were young, you had musicians. There was a clarinet and a saxophone and the different musicians. Today you have a keyboard, a synthesizer, they have a fancy name for it, but you could have a one-man band that plays like a symphony orchestra and the music is magnificent. Will anybody say, there's no Issa during Sefirah? Because that's not a clarinet, it's not a saxophone, it's a machine. It's a machine that produces music, right? So if you have a machine that enhances singing and makes it so suitable that there's a booming industry for this music, whatever you call it, So Taina Rabbi Yashiv and Yisash Chelik Beis Kuf Yud Ches, there's a shipur b'mereches chashmali is chomer tvei. So this is why Lamaisa, the mere fact that there's such a demand for this has shown that there is something very appealing to this type of recordings. Now Lamaisa, there are those that are makel, and it's very hard to talk because there's so much of an industry out there, acapella. But I want to quote what I saw, the Shulchan Alevi, Amud Kuf Lamadal. I think he puts it in perspective. Rabbi was not, he was very into Koyach HaTetera, but here something I think he put it very well. He says he once went to a shul and they had two big speakers blaring Sefirah music. And he said that the whole neighborhood was filled with beautiful Sefirah music, and I never saw such a davar muzar. Ukenira shenitzchu mitzukim es hareilim v'nishba aron hakodesh hi halacha pshuta hamesura v'habrura. In other words, that they have found a way of circumventing the issa by making very appealing and pleasing Sefirah music. This is why many object to the acapella. But there's another point that you have to mention also. That really the problem is music a whole year. Why are we only worrying about Sefirah a whole year? That's a halachos in Shulchan Aruch. So there is a marshag in Chelik Beis Kuf Chaf Hey, and if he said it then, certainly today, his main question is also, why are we so makel with music? And he basically has a tshuva that the most dangerous thing in an Oved Hashem's life is atzvas, depression. When that sets in, a person becomes dysfunctional. And some people, for their emotional well-being, need music. So even though there might be a tzad, or maybe more than a tzad to be machmir, regarding music a whole year, but if it helps us have a simcha tempo and a simcha outlook, it's fine. Now the truth is, you wonder, the Bereshim created us sufficiently we could live without it, but if you need it, you need it. So for those that are so addicted a whole year, it becomes Sefirah, and for them it's torture, maybe they need it as well. Now I'm not saying this applies to everybody. Rav Vosna in Chelik Ches Kuf Chav Zayin, after he asks, he says, but Lamaisa to Milam B'tzchus, people need a lefakeach atzvusa. So again, we have to just say what the Poskim say, avada and avada, it's better without it, and especially during the Yemei HaMetzarim, which is more chamor, and certainly during the 9 days. A person should not just say, I need it, because you don't need it. The Oletzian, Chav Hei Beis, who rather was very makel in most inyanim, but he says, stam just atzv is not a heta, there has to be a real need for it during the Yemei HaMetzarim. If someone feels that he needs it, then avada, does it have to be makel? Because Lamaisa Moshe was makel if it's just a recording of singing. Once it's becoming more and more musically enhanced, you have to worry if that would be like regular music. Chazzanus, so I saw Rav Scheinberg, and I saw others say the same cheshbon. The real issue of music is it brings the simcha that brings the day rikud. Chazzanus doesn't bring the day dancing. Okay, Rabbi Shlomo Zalman, and Halicha Shlomo, it's page Shin Samach Aleph. He says, Lamaisa Chazzanus should be mutter, but then the issa is to be ma'ayit simcha, and those that enjoy chazzanus, this is satisfying. Okay, someone told me chazzanus, chazzanus is perfect, it's zeichel l'chorban. For those who don't appreciate chazzanus, for them it's zeichel l'chorban. For those that appreciate it, it's very, very enjoyable. So obviously, I should mention that Rabbi Yashiv Taka held that the ikka is simcha, and chazzanus is part of that simcha. So I think the point has to be, we have to try to keep this Yemei Sefirah and certainly the Yemei HaMetzarim, because these are messages that we have to hear every single year. Now, people say music lessons is mutter. Now that seems to be a misconception. The Prima Godim in Tavkuf Nun Aleph, Sif Kat Yud, says a much bigger chiddush, that playing music, of course in the base akum, the base mishta'os, if that's your panas, is mutter. So the heta is not practicing or lessons. The heta is panasa. And that's why Rav Moshe and Chelik Gimel Pei Zayin, the Kinyan Torah and Beis Adiktes, the Chutzoni Dal Chinaites, and others say this heta is not, if you're not listening just for fun, or you're not playing just for fun, but you're playing because you want to learn, is mutter. The only heta of practice is if that's your panasa, and you have to practice your panasa. But as Rav Moshe says, stam just as a hobby, and you're practicing how to play for a hobby, so the hobby is enjoyment and they're practicing the enjoyment. So Lamaisa, it's not a heta of lessons or just practicing. The heta is l'tzorech panasa, Chazal din asa, this type of music. I once heard in a yeshiva someone was playing music. What's your heta? I'm just practicing. There's no heta practicing. The heta is l'tzorech panasa. Okay, one bacha says I play drums to let off steam. Okay, letting off steam is fine. Instead of hitting someone else, he hits his drums. But that might be a mashaba kele b'chamasai, that the attitude is a little improper, but that's okay. But basically the heta is not practice, the heta is panos. Someone else asked me, he does exercise, it's very important, and he can't do it without his music. Okay, so what does that mean you can't do it? If the taka can't do it, he needs exercise, so then it's tzarech exercise. But many people listen to shiurim during exercising, so that might be a better idea, especially about a little bit of chavera during these days. But basically, if it's needed and it's not l'shem, the pleasure of it, l'tzarech refuah, it would be mutter. Today we have a situation, you call up a company, a business, they put you on hold and they put on music. So obviously, if we find the Gemara Pesachim, when a person is walking by and he smells a reach of a zara, loy efshem like a mechaven is mutter. No, if this is no other eitzah, it's le'esh like a mechaven. Rabbi Yashib in Ashria Ish Taf Lamadal says that it's hard to change the system. No, you could let it go because no one's enjoying it. It's just trying to make them forget how long they're waiting till someone picks up the phone. So it's sort of basically like a diversion from the reality. But it certainly would be kedai that moisdes yeshivas that have a music the whole year should change it. Either they could put on a nice speech or at least something that's appropriate for Sefirah. But mi'ikididin, it's not asik, it's like a mechaven. The same idea today, there are wonderful chinuch CDs, recordings, children's or adults, and many of them have musical backgrounds and different reasons, but they have some music in it. So that Rabbi Yankiv and Emes Yakov and Adich Shloim Yud Aleph, Hara 53 both say that if it's just secondary, if it's just there to enhance the speech or the story, whatever it is, music that's background is really not the ikar, and it's okay. Rabbi Shlomo Zalman and Halicha Shlomo did add that to give girls dance classes, even though you say they're just practicing, but that's inappropriate because the whole dancing and the whole classes are basically a form of a pleasure. It's very enjoyable to learn how to dance. So that he said they should be maineya, he said, to giving these dance classes during the Sefirah and certainly during the Yimei HaMetzarim. What's interesting, it's an insight into Yimei Sefirah. Is there an issa of music for katanim under bar mitzvah? So, if you know Hilchas aveilus, it's 3 places in Yeridea that there's no din of aveilus for a katan under bar mitzvah. A person lives the young and he has children under bar mitzvah, they go to yeshiva that week. There's no aveilus for a katan under bar mitzvah. Yet we find in halacha, in Hilchas Me'amitzorim, Tafkuf Nun Aleph Yud Dalid, that you're not allowed to give a haircut to a cotton during the Yimei HaMetzarim period. Frag the Magen Avraham, Siv Cotton Lamed Ches, why is there an issa for a cotton on by mitzvah if there's no aveilus for a cotton on by mitzvah like we find in Hilchas Aveilus? And Magen Avraham says something very striking. The aveilus derab machmiren tvei. That means, ovel al ove ve'imai, there's no aveilus for a cotton. But a cotton has the dinei of Yimei HaMetzarim, because that's an aveilus of Klal Yisrael. So more than on a father or mother, there's an aveilus of Yimei HaMetzarim. Now, of course, it makes sense. The same applies to Sefirah. And Taka Rav Moshe in Chelik Dalet, Chaf Aleph, Sid Cotton Dalet, regarding music in Sefirah and Yimei HaMetzarim, he writes, you should be machem by Katan Shegiel Lechinuch, Me'achad the aveilus de Rabim Hu. So Rav Moshe equated the Sefirah with Yimei HaMetzarim, even though the Magen Avraham was only talking about Yimei HaMetzarim. Rabbi Yashiv and Ashrei Ish Taf Lamdal also said this. So we definitely see something very interesting about Yimei HaSefirah. In a certain sense, it's more chama than the aveilus al ave ve'imai. Now, but la yigil lechinuch is mutter. Now, someone asks, so what's the age of a gil lechinuch regarding aveilus of the chorban? That's a tricky question, because some people even be over bar mitzvah don't have that ability. It's something very distant to us, but we have to try. So when the child is old enough to know that these are days of Sarah de Rabbim, it's an aveilus de Rabbim. I mean, till 6 is definitely no chinuch, but beyond 6, if the child is able to comprehend that, that's when the Issa chinuch sets in. It could be, and I'm happy I found this, this goes to the same cheshbon, that if a teacher that has a younger class, let's say a kindergarten, under 6 years old, lo yagi l'chinuch, so al pi cheshbon, she could put on music for the children, because the children are lo yagi l'chinuch, and for the teacher it's a parnasa. I found the Chut Hashani in Shinai Tes says this cheshbon. The only problem with this is, in a yeshiva, in a school, music is going to be blaring, it's not good for the yeshiva, it's not good for the outside people hearing music, so it really doesn't seem to be practical. But in cheshbon, when that's not a question of disturbing others, when it's just a question of halacha l'maisa, there would be that heta that children are mutter, and for the teacher it might be just a parnasa. The question of just singing without any music. In other words, today it's very popular kumzitz, so we're talking about an appropriate kumzitz for the whole year. Is that mutter during the Sefirah period? So the emes is we find the original minhag was getting married. The Rishonim extended that to haircutting. The Magen Avraham extended that to dancing, and the Poskim extended that to music. We don't yet see plain singing. In other words, even if acapella is awesome, because it's recorded singing, but live singing, man dechar shmei. And Taka Orchas Rabbeinu Chelik Beis Sadikei, they asked him about singing, goes, we don't find the Nissan. But the next words, Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky was made that his father did not allow singing in the house during Sefirah. I guess lenafshe. But it seemed that singing, plain, live singing is okay. So the chayrit comes out that if there's a vort, an engagement, which is mutter during the Sefirah, but the Magen Avraham says there's no dancing, the chayra, singing would be mutter. I did see Rahlicha Shloima on Shin Samach. He says you should be maineya, you should refrain from singing that's ma'oyer rikud and dancing. Now, he doesn't spell out the example, but I think an obvious example is dancing, singing with great simcha by a vort is bringing lidei rikud. I don't think it means because you might start dancing. It means it's inappropriate. So it's hard to know by a vort what to do. You're not allowed to dance, but you're not allowed to sing. Well, you sing only slow nigunim. But it seems la'alacha singing is mutter, and Rabbi Shlomo Zalman says you should be maineya. The Chutshani, same place, Dalchan Ayin Tes, says shir shel musa is okay, but shir shel simcha is awesome. So you have to know what to do. Maybe if the chassan feels that he needs a little bit singing, but again, singing in itself is not awesome. I should mention the Leket Yoisha, Chumas Hadeshen, same place, said he did not allow singing the Eliyahus that are sang Matzori Shabbos during the Sefirah. A bigger chiddush, perhaps Yosef Oimitz, that during the Mei HaMatzorim, he sang Zmirois in an undertone, on Shabbos even, because it's Mei HaMatzorim. Someone told me the minhag in the Vina Kehillah that by the Shabbosais of Sefirah there's a special niggin for L'chadoidi, because by them it's not yet Shabbos until Mizmai Shir, because if an oval comes, they greet him after the Chodesh, so it's still not yet Shabbos, and it's Sefirah. But he told me it's not the same niggin like they sing during Yemei HaMatzorim, because it's not that same level of aveilus. But it's interesting how Yidden have a sensitivity, a different niggin for the Yemei HaMatzorim and for the Sefirah period. But la'alacha singing seems to be okay. A kumzitz that's done appropriately, l'chari there's no issa. The big question is, how about this coming week, where there were chazzanus last week, the end of Nisan? There will be chazzanus today, Lamid Nisan. This coming week, where the Sheva Brachas, is there a heta to make dancing? Is there a heta to make music? How about a bar mitzvah? How about a Sefer Torah? So here we come to again another vort kamat of the Magen Avraham that has a big impact. The Mechaba in Sif Aleph says actually 3 halachos. Getting married is categorically asa in Sefirah. Engagements is mutter, but no dancing. But then he says that erisin, now I want to be very careful, erisin does not mean getting engaged. Erisin, al pi Torah, needs a get to break erisin. It's a partial marriage. It's just missing nesuin. But Erusin, you're allowed to make during the Sefirah period. It's like Nisuin. So the Magen Avraham reasons, explaining to Chaba, that ein simcha el chuppah. The real simcha is the culmination of Nisuin. That's asa, but they never asked Erusin. Now again, we don't have Erusin. Even to make a Tnoyim, it's not Erusin. I saw once a story, someone put up a sign inviting everybody to come to the Simcha covered Erusay Benoi. And some Zalman said, no, you have to change that. He's not getting Erusin. It's inaccurate, but misleading. So the Magen Avraham makes three groupings, and he says, but by the engagement party, vort, or l'chaim, or tnayim, you can't have dancing because that's rikudin shel rishus. And only rikudin shel simcha, shel mitzvah is mutter. Zog the Machzah Shekel on the Magen Avraham, the Kaf HaChaim and Steve Cotton Test quotes others, that the Magen Avraham seems to imply if you have a rikud shel mitzvah in the days of Sefirah, it's mutter to actually dance. And let me show you how far this goes. The Karen LeDavid, in Simon Kuf Yutes, was asked about having an achnasa sefer Torah with music in the Sefirah period. And he says it's mutter, even with music, because the Magen Avraham seems to imply rikudin shel mitzvah is mutter, and achnasa sefer Torah is rikudin shel mitzvah. So you're allowed to have achnasa sefer Torah with music, not only like Boima, in the Sefirah period. Apparently, that the issa of simcha is a takanas chazal, and they didn't make it b'makay mitzvah. The truth is, we see something similar in Siv Beis. In Siv Beis, it says the issa of getting haircuts, but the Mechaber says, but a Baal Bris who's making a bris is allowed to get a haircut to cover the simcha. Taspiris is asa, b'makay mitzvah, obviously it's mutter. So here is what the Paiskim say, that if you have a real simcha shel mitzvah, there is mutter to have rikudim based on the Magen Avraham, the way the Achreinim learned the Magen Avraham. Now, you might say, so once it's a mitzvah, why can you make a chasana? Chasana is the full simcha, that's what they asked it. You can't say, b'makom simcha le'gazu, if the is because of simcha. But anything secondary simcha, like erisin or dancing, that's okay. Now, based on this, it makes perfect sense that a Sheva Brach is this coming week, or Sheva Brach is after Chasan of Lag Boima, and you're still holding the Sefirah, we mutter to make dancing. Because that's a legitimate Chasan, he's a real Chasan, there's a Chiyuv to Mesameyachim, he got married Beheta, what's wrong? And Rav Moshe, in Aleph Kuf Nun Tes, and Beis Tzadikei, and Even Ezer, Aleph Tzadik Zayin, he says it's mutter to even have music by the Sheva Brachas. He's talking actually about they got married like Boima afternoon, and the dancing like Boima Lamadal at night. It's back to Sefirah. There's once you got married Beheta, you could have the music. Lamaisa, the Shraga Hamer in Chelik Beis Yud Gimel speaks about getting married on before Shavasa B'Tamuz, and then you have Sheva Brachas and Yud Ches Tamuz. What do? He says you can't have dancing even. He's much more machmir. He based it on a das kedoshim. But most Paiskim seem to be in accordance that you're allowed to have dancing when the chasana was done beheta. Whether it's, like we said, in Chodesh Iyar, after Lag Boima, or after Shavasa B'Tamuz. Now that's regarding dancing. The question that I didn't find before is how about regarding music? Can you have music tomorrow night, Sheva Brachas, or after Shavasa B'Tamuz? So you'll say, well, if it's mutter rikudin, so why not music? But there's a big chilek, because we said earlier, why is music asa kal v'choima from dancing? So maybe when you come to the heta, maybe it's only dancing and not music. And the truth is, I don't know if the Olam figured this out, but Poik Chazi, when the Sheva Brach is this coming week, Chodesh Iyar, or after Lag Boima, there is always going to be dancing by the Sheva Brachas, but there's no music, at least to my knowledge. So although Rav Moshe was makel with music, but the minhag seems to be not to have music, it's levitic enough with plain dancing. But L'idach Gisa, a vort, based in these days, even dancing is awesome. What's challenging is about mitzvah, because the truth is about mitzvah is definitely a simcha shel mitzvah, the Yam Shashleim, and Bava Kama Zayin, Lamed Zayin, Ein lo chasudas mitzvah gedoyle mizu. And based on that, I saw the Or L'Tzion, Rabbi Tzion Abba Shaul, Yud Zayin Aleph, and Rabbi Belsky in the Sefirah, say you're allowed to have Rikudin, because that's Simcha Shal Mitzvah, Suda Shal Mitzvah. However, there's a big chiluk, because calling it a Sudas Mitzvah, like the Yam Shlomo says, is correct. But if you're a Chiyuv to Mesameach to a Mitzvah boy, I mean, you pick him up on a chair, I don't mind, it's very nice, but he's not a Chassan. So who said there's a Chiyuv Simcha? Maybe the crucial factor is if there's a Sheva Brachas, a Chiyuv Simcha, then you could dance. And Lamaisa, it's come out Mefurish from the Rav in Sif Aleph. Rabbi Yashiv said this in Yisrael Yosef Be'al Kov Beis, that he basically said maybe it's only a Chas V'Kala that the Simcha is mutter. Rav Vosna also said you can make a Sudas Bar Mitzvah but no dancing. So this question is really sort of a sticky issue, because the truth is Or L'Tzion was mata even music, but if you look, he is Mekel Be'ikah because the old issa of dancing is a Magen Avram, which Sfarad did not accept, because he was the Dele Ashkenaz. Lamaisa, people would ask me, I would say, if it could be without music, is better off. But the truth is, this person told me his son felt deprived, and if you wouldn't let him have music, he would never overcome it. Maybe Taki should go with Miyakadadin, and Miyakadadin, plain dancing is okay. I told him a story, someone came to the Chazanish, there were two people that wanted maftir one Shabbos, a Chassan and a mitzvah boy. Who gets it? So the Chazanish said that give it to the bar mitzvah boy, because he's only bar mitzvah once in a lifetime. Now we hope the Chassan also has only one afruf in his lifetime, but don't forget he has the Chasana and Sheva Brachas, a ganze yomtiv. The mitzvah boy, this is his big time. So to deprive a child what he thinks is right and others do it, and halacha sanctions it, many shittas do allow it, it's hard to say no when he really wants it. If he's fine without it, it's fine. Now to start with music, of course, that's something that's very questionable. A bris or a pidyon aben, the Or L'Tzion L'Shita say that any simchas mutter, they can say you could have music by bris or pidyon aben. But the truth is we don't have music by bris or pidyon aben during the rest of the year. So that's something that's not done. No, chapa tencel, no. Why not? That's taka a simcha shal mitzvah. Hachnasa Sefer Torah, the Karen of David was makel, even music. Rabbi Yashiv in his Talmud Sefer Yisa Yosef, which is very reliable, he was asked about making us a Sefer Torah with music, and he said, best to postpone until after Sefirah. If it can't wait, you could even make music, because there's ein gvul l'chiyuv simchas haTorah. But he adds a story there, because the Sefer Torah was given in Kiryat Sefer, the Zecher Nishmas, his daughter, Rebbetzin Oyebach, the wife of Rabbi Ziel Zayin Gezun, and he attended, even though he was advanced age, Al Sakar Satayv to the family. And when he came to Kiryat Sefer, you could imagine the band that was there for the Sefer Torah started playing in his honor. And he said, no, stop. No, I was only mat the Torah, not me. So you can't play games. It's mutter l'kvoid ha-Torah, not l'kvoid godl hador. At least that's what he felt. Now, Lamaisa, he does try to avoid it, but if it need be, this would be mutter. Baruch Hashem today, I've Yidden making siyumim all the time. A siyum, Rabbi Yashiv said also, mi'ikir din is mutter dancing, and if it's always done with music, even music, because it's ein gvul l'simchas ha-Torah. But I know it's not done with music and dancing, mi'ikir din would taka be mutter. They speak about Kiddush Levana dancing, the minhag of Ramah and Rosh in Tavcha Vav Beis to dance after Kiddush Levana. And taka, if it's a Simcha Shal Mitzvah, why not? Now, many people don't dance the whole year, so it's not a shayla. But definitely during the Kiddush Levana of Chodesh Iyar, there would be this heta of Dvar Mitzvah. A Sudas prayed in Yeshiva is very popular, and people going there at Srola, the end of Nisan, which is already Sefirah for many. So it's nice, Achdus, but it's not a Sudas Shal Mitzvah, and certainly dancing should not be done. A Sudas Rishus, that will only be a Suda, Lamashal. Let's say the person wants to make a Suda for his vort, or a Suda's Preda wants to make a Suda. So Rav Moshe in Even HaEzer, Aleph Tzadik Ches, a very unusual shayla. A couple got married out of town before Pesach. They first came to their hometown during Sefirah, and many people did not take part of the Simcha. So they wanted to make a Sudas Rishus, no music, no dancing, just like a show of togetherness, that we participate in your Simcha. So Moshe writes in Even HaEzer, Aleph Tzadik Ches, I don't know of an issa making a Sudas Rishus. Dancing is asa, music is asa, but not Suda. And the Rav in Sif Aleph, of our Simon, he writes, Mutta lasei sudas rishus goin simchas mereyis, beloi rikudum umachaylas v'simchas yiseiros. He stipulates it has to be controlled. The Rosh Hashulchan and Sif Beis, the Kavachayim, Sif Kot and Tess all say this, that a sudas rishus that's done within the spirit of the days is okay. I saw the Minchas Yitzkin Aleph Kuf Yud Aleph has the same conclusion from a different angle. They asked him about a very popular minhag of making a dinner. Moistas make a dinner. Yeshiva makes a dinner during the Sefirah period. So that's a big Suda. But then again, it's not a Suda of Simcha. There's no music and it's fine. The last group of questions is the whens of the Issa. When is the Issa applicable? So the truth is, if you start from the beginning like we did, Midin HaGemara and Midin the Tshuvas HaGo'ainim, it should be the entire Sefirah. Mi Pesach ad Shavuos, when they died. However, as we know, the minhagim, the first minute goes basically from Pesach until Rosh Chodesh Iyar. The second goes from Chodesh Iyar until close to Shavuos. I'm not going to get into the details now. But the Chiddush is, if you hold the first minhag, Rabbi, because you have to have 33 days of Sefirah, how could you listen to music during Chol HaMoed? That's part of 33 days. And the Pri Megadim in Mishpah, the end of Sif Kot and Beis, Rikudan u'mechayla shel reshus yesh le'esa b'chol hamoed Pesach. Chayritz pashta cheshbon. You can't tansa beidach chazzanus. If you hold the first 30 days as the minhag, so what about b'chol hamoed? However, as Rabbi Yashiv in Ashri Lish Taf Hamadeis pointed out, that the Pri Megadim was talking about reshus. If a person has music, hopefully it's al simchas yomtiv, hopefully, or any other rikudan u'mechayla shel mitzvah, that would be mutter. But it's saying that there is no issa of music regarding Chol HaMoed, even though for the first minhag it's part of the aveilus. What I found interesting, because it's something I always wondered about, and I now learned it's mamish al sugya. There are people that hold both spheres from beginning till the end, and I wondered why. Bishloima, not to get a haircut until Erev Shavuos. That's a minhag based on Arizal, which has nothing to do with aveilus. If you know, the Arizal has nothing to do with aveilus. It's a pikabala, and even for a simcha, you're not supposed to take a haircut, except of course like Boima itself, like the Arizal gave to his son. But basically, haircutting is a different minhag. But why should there be an issa of punkt of music and marriage they do make? So if you look in the Sharet Tzia and Sif Kot and Dalit, he quotes both Pri Megadim and El Yerabba, and I'll quote the Lashon. Even ad Rosh Chodesh Iyar, and you hold like the second minhag, so till Rosh Chodesh Iyar is fine, or Rosh Chodesh Sivan ad Atzeres, those that hold that it's mutter, yesh l'stapik and yesh l'hakol b'rikudan u'machaylas shel rishus. What he's saying is a magnificent yisoid, that really the issa of simcha is the entire sefirah. But b'makam mitzvah, like getting married, is okay. But just pleasure should be the entire sefirah. All-encompassing issa. It's only mitzvah that's mutter, not rishus. Something like the Magen Avram's distinction. Now, so the ma'isa, those that don't listen to music, tavelei and bracha. So why do people wait anxiously for the end of sefirah, and then they play music? There's pashut. They barely could wait till the end of sefirah. You have to try to find a way of getting them through the sefirah. So pashut for them, it might be necessary for their simcha, but rabbis, we have to keep this in mind, that there is a source in halacha, El Yerabba, Pri Megadim, Sharet Tzia, to avoid music, shel rishus, the entire sefirah. What's noteworthy is that when I was growing up, certainly when I was a child, there were never chazzanus after like Boima until right before Shavuos. There was always after Pesach, but until close to Shavuos, no chazzanus. In recent years, as you probably see, there are more and more chazzanus taking place after like Boima. So I asked someone, what changed? So he told me, because the minhag always was in America, minhag America, to keep the second sefirah. So second sefirah, you could go until Chodesh Iyar. Now I asked in the yeshivas where I come up, I raised a hand, and I saw most people hold the first sefirah. So maybe the minhag changed, or maybe simply there's not enough halls. Not enough halls, we have to find an eitzah. But the ma'isa today, we have a new question. If you have the first sefirah, l'mashal, and you have a chasana when it's during your sefirah, or they hold the second sefirah, and the chasana during your sefirah, which today on both ends, what do you do? So the truth is, most poskim, Rav Moshe also writes this, that you keep your regular Sefirah, and basically you have to go because you have a chiyuv simcha and the chas v'kala. In other words, you go to the chasana and you take a Sefirah dik, but you have a mitzvah to make chas v'kala. So you dance l'shem shemayim. Don't dance before the chasan comes out. That's tam dancing. That's not a mitzvah. And of course, don't shave Zakar Moshe because there's no heter for that. But lamaisa to dance for yenim simcha is mutter. And to leave you with one more interesting question. Someone asked me in the yeshiva, they had this question because there are two minhagim regarding music, and in a dorm there are boys with different minhagim, and they're fighting what to do. I told them, you people missed the point. The whole sphere is to stop fighting. So be noye kavod zeh lazeh and accept one another. I would talk to you all.
Shem Yigashir Torah Big Ashikayach. Smith for today's shir. As Hashem after Minhag Smith will say a siyum of today's shir. To have the great schus of sponsoring a shir or supporting Yigashir Torah, call Yigashir Torah 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. And I'm going to go to the Burgle of Zakis is Israel. Fika, Chibram Torah, Mishnah Madonet Hofetz, and Sidkoi, Yakov Torah.